Preparing a fianchetto often signals a patient approach, aiming to control diagonals from a distance. Centralizing the pawn immediately challenges white's flank development and stakes a claim in the heart of the board. Asserting central influence, white challenges black's pawn advance and opens attacking avenues. Asserting central influence now, the knight prepares to contest the d4 square while defending the e-pawn. Developing the knight now eyes central squares and prepares queenside castling, a solid foundation. Solidifying the center's grip, this knight's deployment prepares for a dynamic struggle across the board. Developing the bishop to this diagonal aims to control the long light-squared diagonal and prepare for castling, exerting subtle pressure. Solidifying the center, black prepares to support the pawn and potentially challenge white's kingside fianchetto, aiming for harmonious piece development. Solidifying the center's pawn structure while preparing a kingside development for the bishop. Developing the bishop here creates a natural battery with the queen and prepares for kingside castling, solidifying black's central pawn structure. Securing the b-file provides a crucial outpost for the rook, aiming to challenge black's queenside pawn structure. Solidifying the diagonal, this bishop prepares for queenside development and potential castling, while subtly challenging white's rook placement. Aggressively grabbing queenside space, preparing for potential pawn storms or queenside expansion. Preparing to reroute the queen to the kingside, aiming to bolster the defense and potentially join a queenside pawn storm. Solidifying the queenside pawn chain while preparing to castle, white embraces a more restrained developmental approach. Castling here secures the monarch, a necessary precaution given the central pawn structure's solidity and white's ambitious queenside pawn push. Creating a safe haven for your king, preparing for a future pawn storm on the kingside while preventing any immediate knight infiltrations. Shifting the knight to d8 prepares a future maneuver towards the queenside, aiming to reinforce the pawn structure and perhaps challenge white's space advantage. Solidifying the center and preparing for kingside castling, this offers a safe harbor. The bishop unblocks the d-pawn, aiming for queenside influence, yet potentially creating light square weaknesses. Asserting central space with e4 opens lines for the bishop and queen, preparing for a potential kingside attack. Instilling a knight into the central fray, this piece now eyes a potential leap onto f4, disrupting white's pawn structure. Preparing to activate the kingside knight, aiming to secure more central space and restrict black's queenside expansion. Shifting the knight to the edge is a curious decision, potentially creating a new attacking avenue, but also a bit of a lonely outpost. Instantly demanding central space, the knight strikes at d5, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and eye the kingside. Shifting the bishop to d8 shores up the kingside pawn structure, preparing for a potential regrouping maneuver. Castling provides the king a safe haven, solidifying the kingside defenses for the impending middle game struggle. Repositioning the bishop to d7 frees up the c8 square for the queen and supports a potential f5 push. Shifting the king to the h-file creates a safer haven, subtly preparing for a potential kingside pawn storm and improving rook mobility. Challenging the knight's central dominance, this pawn advance aims to disrupt white's well-established knight outpost and potentially open lines. Concentrating troops, e3 aims to bolster the d5 outpost and prepare a central pawn push. Fortifying the kingside pawn structure, preparing for potential advances while also somewhat limiting the bishop's diagonal. Unleashing an f-pawn thrust seeks to dismantle black's kingside pawn structure and expose their monarch to attack. Black prepares to develop the bishop to a more active square, potentially challenging white's pawn structure. Unleashing the knight towards black's kingside, aiming to disrupt the pawn shield and exploit early weaknesses. Liberating the d-pawn's influence frees the queenside and begins a crucial pawn exchange sequence. Discarding the knight from the kingside fight frees up the e-pawn for a central advance, though it leaves the king somewhat exposed. Reclaiming the knight, black reestablishes tactical balance, preparing to contest the central space and potentially exploit the open king's flank. Opening the g-file offers attacking possibilities, but weakens your king's immediate defense. Shaping the kingside pawn structure, black immediately challenges white's potentially dominant pawn chain and opens a path for the rook. Shifting the queen to the king's side aims to bolster the central pawn structure and potentially launch an assault. Securing the monarch behind a pawn shield, this knight's repositioning anticipates potential pawn advances and offers defensive support. Unleashing the f-pawn creates an immediate pawn storm, sacrificing material for a potential kingside assault. Disrupting the pawn chain is the goal, even if it leaves the king exposed for a moment. Unleashing the queen aims to pierce black's defenses and exploit the weakened kingside pawns. A bold repositioning of the knight, aiming to disrupt white's kingside initiative. Unleashing an attack, white opens a path for the queen, exposing the black king to dangerous threats. Acknowledging the unleashed kingside storm, this piece withdraws, seeking refuge and preparing a counterthrust. Initiating knight repositioning, aiming to exploit the now open g-file for potential kingside pressure. Reclaiming the open e-file now stabilizes the pawn structure and prepares for potential counterplay against white's king. Unlocking the center now, this pawn thrust aims to shatter black's cramped position and seize control of crucial diagonals. Reclaiming the initiative, black shifts the rook to a more active central file. Unleashing the bishop here aims to disrupt black's central setup and potentially create attacking chances on the kingside.